We already knew this was going to be a really busy week when it comes to Miami Hurricanes recruiting targets making announcements. And as of last night, we now know exactly when my favorite offensive lineman in the class of 2025 is going to make his announcement.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On this episode, we will talk about which is the trappiest of trap games for Miami coming up in their 2024 football schedule. We'll talk about where Miami stands for a handful of five-star recruiting targets and what it's going to take to get some of these over the finish line. Somebody asked me about a conference realignment scenario. I'd like to give Miami's perspective, at least my perspective on how Miami might look at this. But guys, it's already been a busy week in recruiting, and it's felt busy already, folks, and it's only going to start to ramp up tonight. So on Monday night, we got the announcement that four-star IMG Academy standout linebacker Gavin Nix is coming to the U. Then on Tuesday night, Gavin was nice enough to join us on this show. And if you guys haven't watched or listened to Gavin Nix with me on Locked On Canes, that episode from last night is available on YouTube and every podcasting platform. So make sure you check it out because honestly, Nix, he's a cerebral player, unbelievable young man, tremendous family, and I know he's going to make a great Cane. That was made very clear to me in my 30-minute conversation with Gavin Nix last night. I'm so excited for you guys to check that out. But here's some more big news. So there were already certain players we've known were going to make announcements this week. We'll talk about the timelines of how this is going to happen because there's something happening tonight. There's something happening tomorrow. And something's going to happen on Friday, folks. S.J. Alofaituli, one of the top interior offensive linemen in the class of 2025, who's made multiple visits down to the University of Miami. I met S.J. for an unofficial during the spring game a couple of months back. He had a really good official visit in the month of June. This is a standout offensive lineman out of one of the top high school football teams in America, powerhouse Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. And so, early in the week, we weren't sure, when we've known Miami's been trending strongly for Alofaituli, and fingers crossed we can keep it that way for the rest of the week. But we didn't know when he was going to announce. I saw some rumblings and rumors that maybe SJ was going to wait until August, a little bit closer before his high school season started, so we'd have to sweat it out for an extra month. But last night, reports came out Tuesday night. S.J. Alofaituli is going to be announcing his verbal commitment on Friday, July 5th, 2 days from right now. And he's not even going to make us wait long throughout the day because he's going to make his announcement at 12 p.m. Eastern time, which is not commitment o'clock. Commitment o'clock is 7 o'clock, of course, when you usually get the Dennis Smith D-Train bat signal on his X account at 6:30, and then announcement comes at 7. So Alofaituli is going to announce at noon on Friday, despite the fact that it's not happening at 7 p.m., which is usually when it happens for Miami. I still think Miami is more than likely the pick for Alofaituli. 6'3", 295 pounds. He can play guard or center at a really high level. I suspect that, of course, he's going to cross-train because Alex Mirabal cross-trains all of his offensive linemen. But I suspect the role that Alofaituli, if he does pick Miami, I think he would become the long-term center of the future and could be one of the great ones to ever put on the Miami uniform. And there have been some very great centers over the years, going all the way back to my guy, Don Bailey Jr., going back to K.C. Jones, going back to Brett Romberg. I know Matt Lee was only here for 1 year, but he had a really awesome season. Perhaps we could see S.J. Alofaituli become one of those great centers. So that announcement we have to look forward to on Friday, July 5th at 12 noon. Now, again, I don't take the victory lap until we get through the announcement. We'll see what happens because Alofaituli's top three is Miami, Nebraska, and Michigan. So we will see who he chooses, but it comes down to those three. And we'll obviously, within the next 48 hours, we'll know more about where Miami stands. But I can tell you, Miami has put in a ton of energy into the recruitment of Alofaituli, and Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal have seemingly done a really good job of making Miami feel like a family fit for him and his family. And obviously they're not from the area, they're from the other side of the country, but SJ's family seems really comfortable with Miami. So hopefully Miami is the move for him, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's happening on Friday. We've also got announcements coming up with Miami targets on Wednesday and on Thursday. So on Wednesday, tonight, 6 p.m., we're going to see an announcement for 2026 quarterback Dereon Coleman. Really important if Miami can lock this one down this evening, and I like Miami's chances here. I've already put in a Donno ball for the Hurricanes to land Coleman. Quarterbacks tend to come off the board before other players do. You're seeing a lot of 2026 quarterbacks already come off the board. Remember, Miami landed their 2025 quarterback, Luke Nickel, very early in the process. It was before last season even started. Coleman needs to put a little meat on his frame. I think he's 6 foot 165 pounds. But remember, he's only heading into his junior year of high school. So he's going to put on size before he gets to the college level. This guy has a rocket for an arm. He's got a live arm, very quick release. Miami has been strongly trending for several weeks with Dereon Coleman. Other schools that have been kind of in the mix for him are Oklahoma, USF, West Virginia. I think UCF is also in the mix. He plays at Jones High School in Orlando, Florida. So UCF obviously very nearby. And he's originally from Lakeland, Florida. So USF is nearby the hometown for him. But it's one of those things with Coleman. Miami is strongly trending in first place for him. I'm not sure who's in second place for him. It's one of those things where you'd be surprised if the Hurricanes are not the pick for him. And again, it's important if you can lock up your 2026 quarterback really early, they become ambassadors and recruiters for the rest of your upcoming class. So if you can get Dereon Coleman locked in, he can really help you in, potentially recruiting receivers and offensive linemen in that 2026 class. So hopefully he's going to become a Miami Hurricane tonight. So that's Wednesday night. And folks, we're going to get the Independence Day announcement. We're going to get a July 4th announcement from 4-star safety Hylton Drake Stubbs. You guys can let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments below. I haven't seen an official time of day that he's going to make an announcement. If you guys have seen something, tell me. Let me know in the comments. All I know is July 4th. I don't know if it's going to happen in the afternoon. I don't know if it's going to happen when we're setting off fireworks at night. I will set off a bottle rocket in his honor if he commits to Miami. But 4-star safety Hylton Stubbs out of Mandarin High School in Jacksonville is going to be announcing on July 4th. This is one of the elite defensive players in this class. Was a commitment for the past several months to USC, decided to walk back his USC pledge. Oftentimes it can be difficult for USC to hold on players from the East Coast because it is so far away from home. He's decided to take his recruitment closer to home. So for Hylton Stubbs, it's going to come down to Miami versus Florida. Now, when Stubbs initially decommitted from USC, for a few days there, it was looking like the momentum was pretty 50-50 between the Hurricanes and the Gators. That momentum has seemingly shifted in Miami's favor to the point where the chatter from a lot of the Gators recruiting experts out there was, for whatever reason, they were expecting Stubbs to take a little bit longer before making an announcement, and they thought Florida would need some extra time to kind of gain ground on Miami. Then when the announcement timeline came out that Stubbs is going to be announcing on the 4th of July, a lot of the Gators insiders, because I like to check out what the other sides are saying. I don't strictly check out the Miami info. The Gators insiders have become pretty pessimistic. They think Miami is going to be the move for Hylton Stubbs, which would be a huge addition to Miami's defensive class. And also the fact that he goes to Mandarin. Of course, Miami's got Derek Plaz on the team now from Mandarin, but they're also heavily recruiting Jaime Ffrench, 5-star wide receiver from that high school. So maybe landing a teammate of his could help you out there a little bit. So, we're cautiously optimistic that Hylton Drake Stubbs is going to choose the University of Miami. We're not going to know for sure until he makes that announcement. It's going to come down to the Canes versus the Gator on the 4th of July for him. So that's what we're looking at this week. 2026 quarterback Dereon Coleman announcing tonight. 4-star safety Hylton Stubbs announcing tomorrow. And our guy S.J. Alofaituli announcing on Friday at noon. Now, Miami also has some momentum he's not going to be announcing for about 2 weeks, but 4-star defensive lineman Jarquez Carter from Newberry, Florida. He's going to be announcing on July 18th. So that's something we can look at about 2 weeks down the road, but we know what the mission is this week. And guys, we're only getting started on this new episode of Locked On Canes. I'm going to be answering questions from you guys, the Locked On Canes insiders. Got a good question about what's the biggest trap game for Miami coming up in 2024. Talking a little bit more about recruiting targets, specifically the 5 stars. So you want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. There's a reason why Game Time is the only ticket app that I use. And guys, I know some of you sweat it out like, oh man, if I wait till the last minute, are there going to be tickets available? Am I going to get decent prices? Guys, at Game Time, there are always last minute tickets available, and the best savings happen right before the game starts. Major League Baseball tickets, of course, Miami Marlins tickets are always available, but you get the best prices. You won't believe how cheap they are on Game Time. And Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier because prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You could save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything you can think of. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. They also give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, which is a game changer. And the lowest price guarantee is fantastic. If you don't get that lowest price there, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first launch. We're about to launch into some big recruiting news, my friends. We're available free. And by the way, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We get a question from the Locked On Canes Insiders chat from our pal Gideon, who says, hey, are there any player injury or recovery updates on guys like CC Mauinoa and Mark Fletcher, he says. So again, they, especially not during the offseason, they don't give out official injury information. But I obviously get opportunities on this show to talk to players every now and then, interview players here on Locked On Canes. So CC Mauinoa, he's fine. And his brother Kiko, same thing. They both had their shoulders cleaned up during the offseason, but it was like a standard offseason procedure. They're going to be ready to go for fall camp. And CC told me, because he was on this show about a month ago, he's good to go for the opening game against Florida. So no issues there. Fletcher, I don't know the exact timeline for sure of when he's going to play, but it seems like he's going to be ready for the opening game against Florida. We had Mark Fletcher on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he looked to be physically in really good shape coming off the foot injury. He said his recovery is going really well. So he's going to be good to go sooner rather than later. Another one I think about who had to miss spring football was Akeem Mesidor. He was just waiting for those special shoes that have come in, the special cleats. Like, he was healthy just based on his previous foot injuries. He was not cleared for full practice until he got his special fitted molded cleats. He's gotten those now, so he should be good to go. AJ Allen missed the spring with injury, but he's good to go now from what I understand. So the team seems pretty healthy at this point. So we'll see what happens coming up. Thank you for the question, Gideon. We get a question from GME Kane from Ohio, who says he's been a long-time listener. Thank you for that. Says, with all the realignment talk, if Miami were to get left out of the Big Ten or SEC, if they were to get left out of the Power Two, he says, would you rather us stay in a revamped ACC or go to the Big 12? Now, it goes without saying my preference would be to try to get to the Big Ten or the SEC, but your scenario excludes those as being possibilities. Honestly, I think in that unfulfilling scenario, I'd probably rather stay in the ACC than go to the Big 12 because I don't. The Big 12 teams are already making less revenue per season than ACC teams are, so I know that they've got a great hype machine. Brett Yormark, their commissioner, does a really good job making it seem like, the Big 12, it's practically Power 2. I don't really think it's a better situation. You'd probably rather stick with the devil you know. And also, when, it's just a matter of when, not if, Florida State and Clemson get out of the ACC, they're going to have to pay some sort of a buyout to get out of the conference, and then that buyout money gets distributed to the teams that stay around. So again, I'm not saying I want to stay in the ACC, but if it's between the ACC and the Big 12, I'd probably rather stay put in the ACC if it comes down to that. Either scenario not being a very happy one for us, because I do think the revenue would probably be higher in the ACC than it would be in the Big 12. But the short answer is whoever pays you more. That's the short answer, because honestly, revenue is probably the most important thing in this multi-billion-dollar cash cow machine that is college football. You're trying to get the most revenue possible. But the most important thing for both the Big 12 and the ACC, obviously they are not, P2 the way that the SEC and the Big 10 are. But the most important thing is, as long as they both maintain that automatic college football playoff tie-in where the winner of your conference gets an automatic bid to the CFP, that's the most important thing. And as long as the ACC maintains that, I don't see why they wouldn't. I'd probably just rather stand pat in the ACC than go over to the Big 12. But you guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong about that. I just, again, I don't, it's both scenarios seem pretty unattractive, ACC or Big 12. So as long as you're making the same or more money in the ACC, stay put, I think. But not that I want that. We get a question that says, hey, are we fans over concerned about Miami's defensive secondary just because we don't have our stars returning? Okay, so the reason why, I don't even know if concern is the right word. Just the secondary is a question mark compared to other positions on the field because you have less established talent. And it's not to say you have none. Daryl Porter Jr. didn't give up a touchdown last year. Very high Pro Football Focus grades. Underrated as a cover guy. DP is back for his final season at Miami. That's big. Mish Powell comes over from Washington. He was very good last year on the national runners-up. He's either going to play nickel or safety or some combination of the two here. So I don't worry about Mish and I don't worry about Daryl. And there is up and coming talent at other parts of the secondary. But the reason why people get concerned is these guys haven't proven it consistently at the college level yet, right? When you think about Markeith Williams and Jaden Harris. Now, these guys have gotten valuable backup reps the last couple of years behind James Williams and Cam Kinchins, but they haven't been full-time starters yet. And of course, losing James and Cam makes a lot of people worried about what the safety room is going to look like. So Jaden Harris and Markeith Williams have big opportunities to play this year. You don't necessarily want to rely heavily on true freshmen, but Zaquan Patterson, the kid has the goods, right? It's just a matter of getting experience. He's the true freshman out of Chaminade. And there are, same thing you can say about some of the defensive backs. Damari Brown, who may end up starting this year, doesn't have a lot of experience, but this is a former blue chip recruit coming out of high school at American Heritage a couple of years ago. He's going to get opportunities to play. Jadis Richard had a really good spring from Miami. He transferred in from Vanderbilt last year. He's been trending really well. Robert Stafford was a 4-star blue chip recruit going back a couple of years ago. So it's just, the concern comes from the inexperience. That's all it is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because, listen, great players need to get the opportunity to play. And these young, really highly touted players are going to get opportunities to play this year. So, yeah, after losing the likes of Jaden Davis and your top two safeties from last year, people just wonder, how is Miami's young, inexperienced secondary going to do? I think they're going to be coached up very well by Chevitz Jackson and Lance Guidry. They just have to go out there and prove it. And also, you're going to take some pressure off of these guys knowing Miami is projected to have one of the best defensive lines in the country and one of the better linebacker rooms in the country. So the front seven or the front six, depending on how you line up, is going to take some pressure off of the back end. But yeah, I mean, I think people are worried about the secondary just because there are unproven commodities playing those positions. All right, I want to answer this question about trap games when we come back because our guy Delane wants to know, am I most concerned about USF, Duke, or Georgia Tech? Now, Delane, you should have put in D, all of the above. Yes. Miami has fallen in several traps in recent years, right? They lost 5 games last year. They lost 7 games the year before, but I will indulge your question on the trappiest of trap games when we return. I also want to talk about 5-star recruits that Miami is in the mix for. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. With this busy summer, with all this recruiting news, and fall camp is going to be here before you know it. And later this month, I'm going to be in Charlotte covering the ACC Media Days. Now is a great time to become a Locked On Canes insider. I include the link in the show description below. When you become a Locked On Canes insider, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, recruiting scoops, show updates, behind the scenes stuff, one-on-one questions and answers. We've been answering questions on this episode from insiders. Try it free for 14 days. Click that link, sign up, try it free. That after 2 weeks, if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. Get a question from Delane who says, hey, you're staying on top of recruitment for us, but I can't stop looking at the schedule. Who's our biggest overlooked opponent between USF, Duke, and Georgia Tech? All scream trap game, he says, if we're having a good season, he says. Okay, so strictly between those 3, if I'm going to get down to the toughest one, I will eliminate Duke first because that's the only home game out of those 3. And, you know, the narratives that week, everyone's going to be talking about Manny Diaz coming back to Hard Rock. Miami's going to be motivated for that game, as they should be for every single game they play, right? But, you know, and I don't think Duke is going to be that good this year. We'll see if they prove me wrong, but they lost some important players from last season's team, especially Riley Leonard, their quarterback. So I don't expect Duke to be very good. And that's the only home game of those 3. I am definitely not sleeping on USF. And that one is on the road. You go, you know, a few hours up. What would you go to get there? I-75. Yeah, I-75. You go up to the Tampa area, Raymond James Stadium. I'm not very good with my interstates, apparently. I-75. You go up there to take them on. That's one of those things where as long as Miami takes that game seriously based on your talent, you should be able to win that game. And Miami tends to always usually be good for the first month of the season. That was the case last year. Last year, they were 4-0. They were rolling before they got to conference play. USF is one of those early September games before you play. So Miami should be at their best early in the season. So I'm going to say the Georgia Tech game. Obviously, Miami should be motivated after what happened last year at Hard Rock Stadium, of course. But the reason why I say Georgia Tech out of those 3 is Georgia Tech is a good team. Like, you may not be giving Georgia Tech a whole lot of credit, but Haynes King ended up having a nice year at quarterback for them. They've got offensive weapons for him. I'm not so sure about Georgia Tech's defense, but their offense should actually be one of the better O's in the ACC, and you go to Atlanta to play them this year. So out of those 3, I would say Georgia Tech is probably the most dangerous because, you know, I know Duke should be bad. USF should be average, and it's a non-Power 4 school. Georgia Tech is a decent football team. So playing them on the road, I would say out of those 3, that would be my answer, that would be the biggest overlooked opponent because you shouldn't be overlooking Georgia Tech, regardless of what happened in Miami last year. We get a question that says, hey, who do you think are the top candidates for this cycle's big recruiting flip, he says, like the Justin Scott of the last class? Okay, so most likely flips. I look at a couple wide receivers. Like I would look at either Dallas Wilson, who's committed to Oregon, although Oregon, they are having such a strong recruiting. Like Dan Lanning, he sleeps less than Mario sleeps, I think. Like Dan Lanning is crushing it. They've been crushing it with East Coast kids. I'm starting to hear that Oregon is a little bit more optimistic about holding on to Dallas Wilson than they were in the recent past. But Wilson, he's visited Miami a ton, the 4-star, borderline 5-star receiver. So Miami is working on flipping Wilson. We'll see what happens there. And then another one is Joshua Moore. So Joshua Moore, who recently committed to Florida, is a 4-star wide receiver. It's one of those things, and I'm not necessarily saying he's already wavering or anything like that, but Florida plays the toughest schedule in the country. They're probably not going to be very good this year. So you worry Billy Napier's job status, and we know Miami's not going to stop recruiting more. So I would look at that as another potential flip as well. We get a question that says, hey, between the last week and a half and what's coming this week, it looks like we're killing it with 4-star recruits, he says. My question is the status of any potential 5-star recruits. He says, obviously, DJ Pickett is at the top of the list, but who else is possible? So DJ Pickett, like you said, 5-star defensive back out of Zephyr Hills, Florida. Watch out for Oregon with him as well, by the way. Oregon's not going away with DJ Pickett. So that I think that's the bigger battle. We were talking a lot about LSU, but I think Oregon may end up being the bigger battle for DJ Pickett. He's scheduled to announce on October 5th. So we know DJ and the family really like Miami. He's got family members who are part of the Miami family, his cousin and his uncle. But Oregon could be a threat there with DJ. But I really like where Miami stands with 5-star defensive lineman Iose Epenesa. He seems to be between Iowa, where he has family ties, and Miami for him. Miami's been doing a really good job with Epenesa. So he would be, if you can land him, he'd probably him and DJ Pickett, if you can land them both, would be the two top guys in Miami's class. So Epenesa, I'm pretty optimistic with Pickett, optimistic with Epenesa. Then Miami is also, they're very much in the mix for 5-star receiver Jaime Ffrench from Jacksonville. Seems like there's a new favorite for him every week. I think Texas might be the trending favorite for Ffrench again. And he's going to be announcing on August 30th. So there's still a lot of work to be done there. But hopefully if Miami can land his teammate Drake Stubbs this week, that might help a little bit with Ffrench. But that's one Miami's heavily recruiting. And Miami is also very much in the mix for 5-star defensive lineman Elijah Griffin. Georgia has been the trending leader there, but it's not over for Griffin, okay? We get a question from Pat Mack who says, hey, do you think we have a shot at landing both Elijah Griffin and DJ Pickett? He says, by the way, great interview with Gavin Nix last night. He reminds me of Michael Barrow with Dan Morgan's motor. Oh, I like that. So I think I kind of already answered that with the two that you mentioned. Miami, Georgia is the favorite for Elijah Griffin, but Miami is working on that one. And then, Miami's right up there. I believe Miami's the favorite for DJ Pickett, but I'm definitely not counting out Oregon, and LSU fans would probably also say don't count out the Tigers either. But yeah, I think Miami has a shot to land them both. We get a great question from our guy BP, who says, who is the staffer, the Miami staffer that is a star behind the scenes that isn't talked about enough? I'm so glad you asked that question because I'm guilty of it on this show. Not talking about this man enough, but Ed Pata from Miami staff. I always hear about how involved he is in offensive line recruiting, and we don't talk about him enough because obviously everyone talks about Coach Mirabal, deservedly so, great offensive line coach. Mario Cristobal is very involved with everything offensive line, but Ed Pata does not get the credit he deserves. I think he's one of the unsung heroes on Miami's staff. So I'm glad, BP, you gave me that question because we get an opportunity to throw Ed a shout out. And also, like, he's someone who should benefit from, now that analysts and other staffers are actually allowed to coach, like, on the field. I would imagine he's someone who can now get more involved in that. So things are on the up and up for Ed Pata, and I'm glad we had an opportunity to give him a shout out. I want to give you guys a shout out. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Again, we're going to have a busy week coming up in recruiting. Dereon Coleman, Miami target at quarterback 2026. He's announcing tonight. Hylton Drake Stubbs, 4-star safety, announcing tomorrow. SJ Alofaituli, 4-star offensive lineman, is announcing on Friday. So we, good or bad, whether we win or lose those battles, we'll be covering it right here on Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.